am Rylie Godoy. I am from a very small town outside of Ottawa in Canada called Carleton Place. And there is when I was growing up, there's 9,000 of us, but it's a little bit bigger now. I live in the Ottawa area now. I am actually, since going through treatment, I now have 2 babies and I'm a mom and I'm a wife. And so all of the things, but I'm also a confidence coach now. The way I first discovered that anything was wrong was actually on my 27th birthday. So for a couple of months leading up to my 27th birthday, admittedly, I was using oh my gosh, what's that called? A waist trainer. Okay. So I wanted to be snatched for my birthday. And I remember talking to my girlfriend at the time, on my actual day of the birthday party. I was having a joint birthday party with my roommate because we had similar birthdays. And I took off the waist trainer and I was like, I am in so much pain. My back hurts so bad. I feel like such an idiot for using this trainer. What am I doing? I shouldn't have done that. And she was like, oh, it's okay. Whatever, just stop using it and see if it pans out. And I was like, okay. So then we go out that night, we have drinks, we dance, we do all of the things. And then I come home and the next morning I wake up and I'm just in a puddle of sweat in my bed. It was so embarrassing to me. Obviously no one was around, but to my roommates, I obviously told them and I was like, what's going on? This is crazy. And that was the first time I actually noticed that something was wrong with me. Obviously, I was 27. I thought it was very healthy. I never obviously thought that anything like this was happening. So I just kind of brushed it under the rug and I didn't really think much about it. It wasn't for about a month and a half, I would say, until I actually realized that there were more things happening because my back pain was getting worse. So I remember specifically because I actually had to go to a work conference. It was exactly a month later. I went to this work conference and I met my now husband actually. But when I was going through that whole week and that whole experience, I could just recognize my back getting so, it was so painful. But I was, again, admittedly 27 years old. I was diving into the drinks, just kind of pretending it didn't exist. But when I came home from that work conference was the first time I actually went to the ER. And when I went the first time, they kind of convinced me that I pulled a back muscle, which to me checked out because I was using that stupid thing. And I was like, okay, that's probably is what's happening. So they just gave me Advil, sent me home, sent me on my way. And I was okay with that. We decided to fly out to LA and have kind of a 10-day trip there. And it was a lot of fun, but I noticed that again, the back pain was getting worse and worse. I was a little bit itchy, but it wasn't anything crazy. And I noticed me continuously having to tell my roommates before I left or when I was in the apartment to just turn down, to stop turning off the AC because I'm sweating so much. And we were getting into these roommate fights, all stuff. Anyways. So I went with him to LA and Vegas to go really, I don't know, just meet up and have fun and whatever. But I could barely move. I was truly in paralyzing pain, but it was a new fun thing. So again, just now looking back, I feel like an idiot, but I was just acting like nothing happened. And I was just moving as though I was so healthy. He would go to the bathroom and I would take 2 Advil really quick and chug water. It was just a lot. And then when I came home from that trip in August, I ended up actually going to the ER again, and they were saying that you must have a kidney infection. I was like, okay, doesn't really check out, but let's pretend it's true. And I was being noticed at work how low energy I was, and my boss kind of getting not mad at me, but she was like, you're yawning in every meeting all of the time consistently. What's going on? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm in this new relationship. He's long distance. We talk all of the time. Again, excuse after excuse after excuse. And then when I'm going to the doctor, they're also giving me, like back pain, and oh, maybe it's menstrual pain, maybe it's kidney pain, maybe it's all of these things. But all of the results and all of the answers were take Advil, go home, wait it out. And I started actually, as we started creeping up into November, December, is when I actually was starting to feel like I was waking up in the middle of the night with crippling pain, like not being able to breathe when I would drink alcohol. It was just awful. Like I can't even explain it, and I can't even explain the pain, but it was so hard because I was trying to take myself seriously. I was in my mind doing all of the right moves. Like people would look at me and say, "What's going on with you?" And I'd say, "Nothing." Like it might be a kidney thing, but it probably isn't. Like it was just one thing after another. And I felt like I was really trusting in the doctors to give me the answers and give me the solutions. At one point, one of the doctors did mention, they were like, have you ever had mono before? Or have you ever had HIV? And I was like, oh, that's super weird. And then cause I'd never had mono. And then I naturally, like crazy 27-year-old girl, was like, oh my God, he has HIV and didn't tell me. Obviously he didn't. Like it was like outrageous. Like he was like, I don't know why you're asking me that. But and so so looking back now, I'm realizing those doctors asking those questions because those are symptoms of lymphoma. And like if you haven't had those before, it likely isn't lymphoma. One thing that I didn't recognize or realize, and I should have really been more conscious of and present with and told the doctors about, is that my dad had Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was 4 years old. So it wasn't something that was top of mind because honestly, I was so little, I didn't even realize that was the type of, that they always called it Hodgkin's. So to me, it wasn't even really registering that would be like cancer. And my mom, a few years before, had breast cancer, but it wasn't anything that, like, to me, this wasn't like a breast. I wasn't feeling any lumps on my breasts, and I wasn't having any of those types of symptoms. I don't know. Like for me, cancer was really not top of mind until really truly until I started doing the work to find like a general practitioner, because I was like, I need somebody to start like taking me seriously and start realizing my symptoms and tracking them and it being on my file, because I feel like I'm getting a little bit lost in the system here, going to the ER all of these times. Go to this like general practitioner, my first meeting with her. So I was talking to her and I was like, listen, I know that this is typically just supposed to be like a let's catch up and tell you my history, but what's going on is I can't stand up. I can't I can't keep anything down at this point. My back is in so much pain. If I drink any form of alcohol, which I wasn't drinking. I feel like I'm acting as though I was drinking a lot. I wasn't drinking as much as I think it's coming out. But like at Christmas time, I had a beer and I was like, like I couldn't breathe. And then so like my boyfriend brought me to the hospital and they were like, oh, take some Pepto-Bismol. It's just like, I'm like, okay. Anyway, so I was like listing all of these things. She literally pressed on my stomach and she was like, you need to go to the ER right now and you have to get an ultrasound because there's like, this is way more serious than you think. I get my ultrasound done. They bring me back down to a room and Felipe is just being so funny. Like he's making me laugh, like literally out of a movie, like blowing up the glove type of thing. Like just like making me like laugh so much. And then the doctor comes in and he's so serious. And like, we just were not serious. Like we weren't, you know what I mean? Like we were just like little kids, like being goofy, whatever. And so the doctor comes in so serious, puts my bed into like sit up position. And I was like, this is weird. Like, okay, like I feel like he's about to like drop something serious. And then he was like, okay, you have lymphoma and we just don't know if it's stage 3 or 4 yet. I had my biopsy done. And when they took out the biopsy, because you're awake during it, and they took it out of my neck. And so I was, because I'm just a weirdo. I don't know if people normally do this, but I was like asking them about it. Like I was like, so how long have you been doing biopsies for? Like how long have you been a doctor for? Like all of this stuff. And then after I was like, so is it definitely cancer? And they were like, it's definitely cancer. Like 100% it's cancer. I went back to Toronto. My mom came with me, and my best friend was there too because she was with me there through it all, so it didn't really matter. And they were like, yeah, so it's stage 4. You have Hodgkin's lymphoma. You're going to do 12 rounds of ABVD. If that doesn't work, you'll do the MCOP, and we'll have to like just see how it goes from there. Treatment, because I was so young and I didn't have babies, didn't start until after I did IVF. Which to me was something I didn't realize was actually like, I don't know. I never thought that was even a thing for if you got sick. Like, that was obviously not my first thought when I got diagnosed of, am I going to have babies? Because obviously my first thought was, am I going to live? Like, and so when I went to Ottawa and met with my oncologist, he was pretty much like, if you want that, then we need to go through that whole process first, and you obviously can't start treatment until then. So the treatment plan was the same. He had always suggested that I was going to have ABVD treatment until, and if it didn't work after 4 rounds, then I would be switched over to MCOP. And if I did the MCOP chemo, that was the one that was harsher, and I would lose my ability to have babies. And so he was like, just to be prepared, once we start chemo, we can't go back. For me, the worst part was waiting in between the diagnosis and the treatment during this IVF process. So number one, it was so weird. So Felipe, actually, just to talk about that story a little bit, only because it's relevant to this, is he had decided as soon as I got diagnosed, I'm coming. I don't care. I'm going to come to Canada and be with you, whether I lose my job or not. I'm going to come to support you. I'm not waiting around anymore. So once I moved home and I was in so much pain and screaming for Felipe, my parents were like, okay, he can, like, whatever she wants, she gets. And if she wants him to come, and we had the smallest house ever, and my whole family was living there. My brother was living there. My niece was there every couple of weeks. Like, it was just a packed house, but I was so sick, and my parents were like, okay, he can come. So it was so weird, because at this point I'm dating Felipe 7 months, and I'm calling him and I'm like, do you want children? Yes or no? Because if you don't, then I'm not, like, I don't care for it, to be honest with you. Like, I'm in so much pain. I just need to move on and start my treatment and hope it works. Treatment alone is the 12 rounds of ABVD. I had to do, essentially it was chemo for 6 months. Every 2 weeks, I did a round of chemo with all of those drugs, the ABVD drugs. And the side effects from that, for me, it was really weird, because after the first round of chemo, I felt very ill. Don't get me wrong. Like, it makes you so tired. It makes you so nauseous. It makes you so weak. But for me, I was in so much pain, and I had been waiting months and months to get through, not months, maybe a month and a half, to get through this IVF stuff. So for me, I was in so much pain that I actually felt so relieved after the first round, because I just was like, oh my God, I could breathe again, which was also an amazing sign, because it was like, okay, it's obviously working. Like, something's working here. And then, after the second round, I was kind of told, okay, you're going to lose your hair after this one. And I did. And then I did. I just kept going back. Obviously, at one point I did have neuropathy, which neuropathy is when you're getting too much of a certain drug. And then if you don't flag it with your practitioner or your oncologist, actually, that you could actually end up with permanent neuropathy, which essentially just means you truly cannot feel your hands or your feet, or you lose like certain parts of, well, for me, it was hands and feet. And some of my friends that I've made through the Young Adult Cancer Canada group, they also have neuropathy in their hands and feet. So I don't know if it's elsewhere, but yeah, so it was like that for about a couple of weeks, and then I got that figured out. Um, but one thing for me that was so important. So after the fourth round of ABVD, is when they do another round of PET scans, CT scans, and all of the testing just to make sure that it is working. And that was truly when I felt like more comfortable because that was really like, okay, are we going MCOP or are we staying with ABVD? Because ABVD was obviously the best case scenario. My brother at the time, because we were living with him, he was living in the same house as me as I was going through treatment. He came up to me after I think my fourth round and he was like, "Hey, Rye, I have this lump on my neck. Like, is that the same lump?" I was like, 100% it's the same lump. I was like, "You definitely have cancer. Like now mom, dad, and me have had it. So like you definitely do." So luckily for him, I got him in with my oncologist and he ended up having stage 2 lymphoma. But unlucky for him is that he got the same treatment as me, as someone with a stage 4 lymphoma with it all over their body. So he also had to do 12 rounds of ABVD as well. But I think we're the only brother sister duo that had to do chemo together, or that I was going to say got to, but I don't know if that's like a bragging right. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but that did chemo together at the hospital and at the Ottawa General, which is so weird, but really nice of him as a big brother to step in and not let me do that alone. Hodgkin's lymphoma for sure is not hereditary. But they claim it's not hereditary. So it's environmental. So I did do genetic testing. There's actually no genetic testing for Hodgkin or for lymphoma at all. There's only testing for breast cancer, genetic testing for breast cancer, but some of the cells that can be found in the breast cancer testing can also cross over into lymphoma. So I actually did do that testing for breast cancer. I qualified because my mom had breast cancer, but there was no genetic testing for the Hodgkin's lymphoma. But I do know that 3 of 4 of us having Hodgkin's is so rare. Like it shouldn't have happened. So to me, it must have been an environment thing. But what throws me off is that my brother had lived at home for a few more years than I had. Like we weren't really in the same environment when it happened. So I don't know. It truly is still a mystery, but yeah, I know the genetic testing from the breast cancer one came back, and I didn't have any of the transferable cells or whatever it may be. And you know what's actually crazy? Fun fact. No, this isn't fun fact, but it must be my house because my cat recently passed and he also had lymphoma, we found out. On his like last days, they were like, "Oh, the testing came back." It's like, it has to be that house. It has to be that house. But I didn't live in that house for so long. So I have no idea. I am officially at my 5-year mark. On August 2nd was when I am officially, I'm like so happy. I got so emotional about it because it really does weigh on you, that 5-year mark. Because one thing I really don't think that people who aren't in the system recognize too is when you hear people say that they're cancer free, it's they're cancer free after that 5-year mark. So especially going back to that breast cancer thing, that in itself, like the breast cancer survival rate has really gone up, but that is truly after the 5-year mark. That's not the before 5-year mark. That rate has not gone up as much as it should have at this point. But anyways, yeah. So now I'm officially cancer free. I did have a little bit of a scare a couple months ago, which kind of brought me back to reality, but we were all good. It was definitely a whirlwind because after I finished treatment, 2 weeks later, flew to Vegas, got married to my now husband, and and then we moved back to Toronto for a couple of years. Obviously, went through some mental health stuff. But the other thing was too, at the point, everybody was going through the mental health stuff, and for me, I felt like, wow, I feel so fortunate to have gone through that last year and not this year, because there were people who were going through treatment and going to the hospital, obviously, like outpatients to go get treatment and get chemo, and they were being like, people were mad at them or whatever. I saw like people were like attacking them almost for going up to the hot, like, it was just, I felt so grateful and so thankful to actually not be in that situation. I felt awful for the people who were in that situation. I felt like I couldn't complain about my mental health because the world was going through a crisis, and it's not about you anymore. And like, it almost felt like I had a year ahead of everybody on the lockdown, because I was like, obviously you're immune. So you don't really leave the house. You can't really leave the house. You don't really have the energy to leave the house. So it was like just an added layer. And then obviously a new marriage. And so trying to make that all work, like there was a lot of things going on, and it was very isolating. If there's anything that I learned from this whole experience, it's that being vulnerable, being honest and raw with yourself first about what you're going through, how it's affecting you, and allowing yourself to feel comfortable and okay with being so miserable. Like, you're okay. Like, once you become okay with that and you open up to the people around you and you tell the people around you, I'm sorry that you're going through this. Like, I think the most important thing is to be vulnerable with yourself, be comfortable with who you are, the feelings that you're going through, they're all so valid. And I think that the more you open up about that to the people around you that are supporting you and just being with you, they will respect it and love you so much more. And I think the one thing our world is truly lacking is a little bit of empathy, but I think that's only because we are so scared to be vulnerable with ourselves. So if anybody comes across this story, I would say do your best to try to be as vulnerable as you can with the parts of you that you can be, because it will change your life. We all need people and we all need support, and we are all going through this world alone, whether we have a million people surrounding us or not. So the more open and honest we can be with our community, with our friends, with our family, the more loving and exciting it will be.